So good evening and welcome to you all. I want to really thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Corey Schneider-Perugini, and I imagine you are all here for slightly different reasons. Some of you may have attended the event in October 2018, at which the author of Color of Law, Richard Rothstein, joined several hundred of us at MATC Auditorium to discuss our country's forgotten history of how we became so segregated. Some of you may be just joining out of curiosity, or perhaps you are one of the many people who volunteered your time with Divided by Design in one of many capacities. But the one common thing that brings us together now is that we know segregation has harmed our country, our region, our city, and us, and we want to do something about it. We know things can be better. We want to be part of that solution. So again, welcome to you all. Just a little housekeeping. Our presentation tonight is taking place on Zoom. Right now, I think we can't hear or see you, but we do want to hear from you in the chat section. Steve, who you may have met already, Steve Miner, one of our team members, will be monitoring the chat to let us know if there's anything we need to address. We'll also take a couple breaks after Heidi and Heather speak about the curriculum and the website to address anything in the chat section. And our goals tonight are to update you on what we've all created with your help, the curricula, the website, the timeline. And second, to suggest ways for you to all re-engage with this effort or other efforts that redress segregation. With that, I think I will hand it back over to Heidi.
So before we jump into sharing some of our content, we want to acknowledge that we're standing on the land of Indigenous folks who were here well before us, and we want to acknowledge and honor the inherent sovereignty of the 13 American Indian Nation in Wisconsin. So the land that we're here for this Milwaukee event is that of the Kickapoo, the Peoria, the Potawatomi, Menominee, the Miami, the Ho-Chunk, and the Ochagee-Chikowin people and nation. And today, as we talk about the history and legacy of segregation in housing in Milwaukee, we want to recognize that these themes of violence and displacement and dispossession, the loss of community and trauma are really part of a longer history of Milwaukee.
Thanks, Heidi. Since it's been a while since we all engaged, and many of you were involved in this process since back in 2018 or 2019, I'd like to recap how this project got started. So just setting a little context in Milwaukee, in the spring of 2017, Reggie Jackson, Milwaukee historian, began to deliver around Milwaukee a presentation called The Hidden Impact of Segregation. And then in that presentation, he provided attendees with an overview of the causes of segregation in Milwaukee. There were packed houses at the 80 plus presentations that he delivered that demonstrated really that there was a lot of pent up interest in Milwaukee area residents in having more complete and accurate picture of the roots of segregation. More than what had been taught or believed, but prior to that. And around the same time, 2017, 2018, many Milwaukeeans were commemorating the 50th anniversary of the March on Milwaukee, the fair housing activism. And then in the spring of 2018, LISC Milwaukee and the Metropolitan Milwaukee Fair Housing Council, where I work, launched a community-wide book read of Richard Rothstein's Color of Law. Oh, I have a prop, Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America. And throughout the summer and fall of 2018, over 60 organizations and individuals organized events around the city and suburbs to discuss the book and the active role our government played in promoting and maintaining racial segregation. So in October of 2018, the author, Richard Rothstein, presented ideas from the book and participated in a panel discussion with Reggie Jackson, and LISC and the Fair Housing Council surveyed 350 attendees at that event at MATC to gauge their interest in what actions they would like to take in response to this newfound understanding of this history. And attendees overwhelmingly supported the recommendation that we create a curriculum for middle and high school students. So at that point, we wanted to figure out who would self-identify to lead that project, as we had no funding to go ahead and make that curriculum. And a few individuals stepped up to guide that building of that curricula. First was Heidi Erstad, Steve Miner, Steve Schaffer, and myself. And this team determined that we would have 4 essential phases to build this curriculum. First, we needed to establish Milwaukee County's history of racial segregation. We realized we needed to Milwaukee-ize the color of law. We needed to create a curriculum to engage middle and high school students, pilot that curriculum, and then distribute that curriculum. So, driven by Milwaukee area citizens' frustration of our segregation, our team of 4 was able to re-engage many of you in this process of this curriculum and timeline creation. And this project was 100% volunteer-led and implemented. So kudos to those of you who played a role in that. So creating the timeline of Milwaukee segregation was at times tedious and other times riveting. We combed through hundreds of files and archives. We called upon some really dedicated volunteers. A lot of you are on the Zoom call tonight. Pre-pandemic, we hosted in-person build days at libraries, at the Milwaukee County Historical Society. And these days included searching through archives of racial restrictive covenants and other discriminatory language used by Milwaukee area real estate professionals. We had access to several bankers' boxes of files used in the 1980s Milwaukee Public School desegregation lawsuit. And our timeline really began with the product of many others who did this work before us. In 1984, Milwaukee Public Schools sued 24 neighboring school districts over resistance to integration. And a small team of researchers gathered evidence, including racially restrictive covenants, records of municipal discrimination, and articles chronicling our history of segregation. And so for that, we thank Fred Freiberg, Lois Quinn, and Ruth Zabrinsky for laying such sturdy groundwork for this timeline. So to sort and catalog all of those records, articles, and other archives would have been nearly impossible without this army of dedicated volunteers. And so for that, we thank those of you that assisted with that. And initially, the timeline was only to be used as content to guide the curriculum design, but it soon became clear that the timeline should be made more widely available to the public as a web-based tool. So mid-pandemic, after the records had been cataloged, we got 3 great volunteer interns who were instrumental in curating those records. Those folks were essential to transitioning from a comprehensive list of records and articles to web-based timeline. They painstakingly reviewed, wrote, curated timeline events, and edited videos to augment the timeline stories. So for that, Nate, Will, and Adam, we really thank you. Once we realized we would require a website, someone stepped up to walk Heidi through WordPress. Howard Liu did that, and another volunteered to create our logo. Thank you, Lauren Marvell. The web-based timeline is primarily complete now, and Heidi's going to walk you through that. And the Divided by Design team continues to search for our racial justice or educational-based entity for that timeline to reside and be maintained over time. As our volunteer selves have to go on our own ways and maybe can't maintain that forever. So simultaneously with the timeline, teams of educators were meeting regularly to design the important curriculum. Issues they considered were the content to be included in the curriculum, adhering to state standards, and this group of dedicated educators shared resources they used to teach students about racial segregation, reviewed additional curricular materials for inclusion in the final curriculum. Before working with students on this forgotten history, teachers needed a short course summary of the concept presented in Color of Law, and Elizabeth Flam developed a set of educational modules that do just that and then some. So thank you to Elizabeth. Thank you to Katie Carvalho for her ongoing work on shaping the final version of the curriculum, and special gratitude to Heather Godley, who you'll meet in a second, who devoted countless hours to developing and fine-tuning the final version of the curriculum materials. and piloting it in her high school history classes, both virtually and in person. And thank you to the following people who lended your expertise and your time to our Divided by Design MKE team. Chris Cantwell, Adam Carr, Heather Godley, Kaylin Haywood Sr., Reggie Jackson, Maddie Reardon, Richard Rothstein, Dr. Rob Smith, Chuck Taff, and Mary Kay Wagner. And finally, we had a trio of active Milwaukeeans who provided really important feedback in their review of our processes and products through an anti-racism lens. And for that, we called them our accountability board. Our deep gratitude goes out to Wendy Hamilton, Reggie Jackson, and Ray Johnson. And I think without further ado, I want to hand this over to Heather Godley, who's going to give us a brief summary of the curriculum.
Corey, I'm just going to take a second to acknowledge all the folks, just so everyone gets a sense of all the folks who've been involved in creating this, what you're about to see.
I didn't know it was animated, Heidi. This is lovely. Good job.
And I think that's a really important way to kind of start off this curriculum work, that this was a group effort of so many people who put time and effort into this with the goal of helping our students understand the history of segregation in our community and what we can do about it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. There we go. Hopefully people can see that. So we wanted this curriculum to be very firmly inquiry-based. We know that students get excited about being able to explore. We didn't want this to be something that was just kind of worksheet-based. We wanted students to be able to have some voice and choice as they explored this topic. So 79 teachers responded to a 2019 teacher survey, and more than half of them strongly disagreed that current curriculum is effective in developing student understanding of the impact of segregation. Now, many teachers contributed things that they had been doing in their own classes to bring attention to the history of segregation, and we are very thankful for all of those teachers that provided models of what they did. And some of those things we were able to incorporate. So we know that, students generally are aware that segregation is bad, but in some cases they didn't know that segregation happened in Milwaukee. And if they did, they often did not know who or what was responsible for segregating Milwaukee. Often what they did know was, what they did think was that it was just kind of individual prejudice. So we wanted to use this as a way to have students explore and develop a more accurate understanding of the history of segregation and its lasting impact, as well as feel empowered to be able to do something about it. So when we surveyed teachers, these were some of the key understandings that teachers wanted for their students: to know about the city, to know that segregation is not an accident, to understand that segregation wasn't just a Southern phenomenon, to understand that racial disparities in outcomes are the results of segregation by design, and that just because it was set up this way, once we know that, doesn't mean that it needs to stay this way, that it empowers us to make a difference. I think as we looked at learning targets, this quote from an Escuela Verde teacher was really kind of central to what we were doing. She said, "My students know and are living the experience of segregation. Teaching them the history gave them the vocabulary to make sense of it." And I think that guided a lot of our work. So we used the C3 inquiry design unit planner. So everything is, focused on inquiry. So we have kind of an overall inquiry question. Does it really matter that Milwaukee is segregated? And then we have 4 supporting questions. And all of this, Heidi will show you later how to get this complete curriculum online. So first, in order to look at, does it really matter that Milwaukee is segregated? Students first explore who segregated Milwaukee and how. And this is something that we were very conscious of. We kind of started with the idea of how was Milwaukee segregated. We knew we wanted to start with that history. And then we really realized that it was important to have this be active. We needed to be careful of our language and not use the passive voice. So looking at who segregated Milwaukee, on what levels, and how that happened. How did housing policies affect individuals? How does the past connect to the present? What is the lasting impact of segregation in Milwaukee today? And then students take informed action. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to give you some examples of how students have walked through this. Now, these are all students from my classroom in Racine, and sometimes they're a little bit disconnected from Milwaukee's history. Heidi will also talk about the next phase, which is piloting the curriculum in Milwaukee County. So we're very much looking forward to that. So to stage the compelling question, we have students explore the racial dot map. CNN has a racial dot map that students can kind of zoom in, they can look at their neighborhoods and look at the racial demographics in that area. And it really generates a lot of discussion among students. We then have them look at a short video that uses humor to kind of broach this very complex topic. And that is Adam Ruins the Suburbs from Adam Ruins Everything. So it's a short clip. And then we use a Zen Education mixer to have students kind of look at some of the people involved on a national level. We are working right now to Milwaukee-ize this mixer so that it will be more personalized. Most of the rest of the curriculum is all very much based on Milwaukee. This one will be transforming that in order to be more Milwaukee-based. So our first supporting question of who segregated Milwaukee and how. This is something where students explore the timeline that Heidi will show you in a little bit. And also we have just an opportunity for students to look at some primary sources. They do a gallery walk around the room, put Post-its up, whether virtually or in person. You can see this was a virtual example where students are just looking at some of these primary sources and starting to ask questions and think what they see, what they wonder. And so that's a way, what they noticed, so that's a way for them to engage with these primary sources. We then have stations that address some of these concepts: redlining, urban renewal, contract sales, zoning, and they fill out a graphic organizer to talk about, how the main ideas and look at the consequence of that. And once they've gotten that background so that they kind of understand how these tools were used and who used these tools in order to segregate Milwaukee, we wanted them to be able to look at how housing policies affected individuals. So we have a series of firsthand accounts. Some are text, some are video, some are audio from a wide range of primary sources where students can read examples of move-in opposition, people talking about their own experiences with urban renewal, racial covenants. And so then students use that information that they've learned in order to create a one-pager so that they visually represent a visual representation of that concept. So here you have just a couple of examples of 2 students who were visually representing the idea of urban renewal. And a few more examples of, of redlining, just to give you an idea of how students were processing this information and these stories from individuals. and a few students did a poetry option. Then we wanted to make sure that students understood how the past connects to the present. So we did this in two ways. One, there was Bread for the World. The Bread for the World Institute has a simulation that's the racial wealth gap learning simulation. It can be done either virtually or in person on paper. And that's something that helped students see the through line from past to present, because we thought that was very important. Students also explore Not Even Past, which is an amazing website that allows you to look at areas that were redlined and areas that were greenlined and see the social vulnerability index now. So this is a really powerful way for students to kind of explore and be able to connect those dots. Our fourth supporting question is looking at the lasting impact of segregation. And the way we explore this with students is by having a visual of a tree. And if we talk to students about what happens if you have poor soil and what happens to the tree, the leaves on the tree. We also talk to students about what can happen if you have better soil and changing that soil. So what we do here, we have this, tree here that is drawn. And then we have students kind of refresh their memory of these techniques that were used, these policies and practices that were used in order to segregate Milwaukee. They kind of visually represent that in the soil. And then they explore excerpts from articles looking at the effects of segregation in Milwaukee today. And it's from, all different, let me see if I have it on the next. All different examples. Some students looked at lead pipes. Some students looked at food deserts. Some students looked at infant mortality, asthma. So a whole range that students were able to explore in different areas in order to look at what happens when the soil is tainted with these toxins of segregation. So they wrote their key takeaways on the tree. And I think that was at least my students found it very powerful to see that there was this, visual correlation between areas that had been redlined, areas that had been deliberately segregated, and the outcomes that they experience today. And then we wanted to have students think about ways that people are actively working today to change the soil, to create a more positive environment in which Milwaukee can thrive. And so we have students look at other excerpts from articles where people are working to create change, to address these lasting effects of segregation. And so they put those changes in the roots, kind of healthier soil, and then they kind of examined things that they wished for and wanted in their communities, and what would come out of this, the more healthy leaves that would come out of soil that was desegregated. So, students then do a summative performance task. This is part of the Inquiry C3 framework. We have we wanted to make sure that we differentiated for students, not only in terms of voice and choice, but also having some scaffolds to help students if they needed it. So they can do a claim evidence reasoning paragraph to kind of present their view, their ideas, and the option to take, or the different options of ways to take informed action. So students can choose from teaching others accurate history, supporting existing organizations, and holding institutions accountable for building a better future. And just to make sure that students are having this ability to be civically engaged in our community. And a few more examples here. And I think student response in general was pretty positive, that students, whether they had known about segregation before or not, I think most of them, at least in this very limited pilot that we've done, have really been very responsive to learning about this history and feeling empowered to go forward. And I think I will pass it over. We can answer any questions, and then to kind of look at next steps. Heidi will talk about that when she discusses the website.
before we get right into that, this is Steve Miner. I wanted to just reiterate the fact that we have a chat. If you've got any questions, if you've got any ideas or thoughts, please put them in the chat. All of this is being recorded. All of this will be available on the Divided by Design website and the Facebook page. We hope to have it up within the next few days, but please share your ideas and your thoughts. And I think Heidi will take it over from here.
Sounds good. So if any folks have any questions about, we know that was like a fast tour of the curriculum. So if you have any questions or comments, please just throw those in the chat. I'm going to share with you where all of this lives, as well as some of the other products and pieces that have come out of our collective work together. So our website is DBD Divided by Design MKE, dbdmke.org. And someone will throw that in the chat, I hope. Gives a little bit of background of how this project got started, of how we as adults learned about this forgotten history. We as white adults forgot about this because it was not taught by design, but by choice. So we wanted to create this solution to help make sure that this was taught by design again and not by choice. I'm going to just do a quick walkthrough of the website so that you know where all the pieces that all of y'all have helped contribute to. If you go to the first part, it's called Get Informed. We have created a vocabulary list, a glossary of terms that are related to racial segregation, housing segregation, and those terms appear all over our website. So you'll see those as hot links throughout the website. We wanted to also point out that the redress movement, which we'll hear about in a little bit, also has an outstanding vocabulary list that gives some examples of what each of these look like in action. The next piece is really the meat of what folks have been participating in terms of Milwaukeeizing the curriculum. So this is an annotated timeline of local, state, and federal events that show efforts by multiple actors empowered to segregate housing in Milwaukee by race. And you'll also notice that we have included examples of resistance throughout. We ask that you consider who is the actor, what's the action and the purpose, and also to consider what's the impact, both immediate and long-term, of each of these events. So as you scroll down, you'll see an annotated history of housing segregation in the Milwaukee area. And again, this will include federal, state, and local actions. You can use this handy dandy little timeline on the side to jump through years. So I can jump right down to 1949. For instance, you'll notice that there are snippets of some of the primary sources included, and some of the events have videos as well that help to illustrate what.
No, I saw it when I was coming in here.
Yeah, but then I must have drove right over it.
Oh,
So, so that is the timeline and the piece that a lot of you on the call and a lot of the folks that we are acknowledging have done the work to create. Finally, we have a page that talks about the impact of segregation on the city and the county of Milwaukee, both the disinvestment and investment in neighborhoods, and how that has created over time a range of disparities based on access to resources and opportunities. So we share a hypothesized pathway to help explain how the past connects to the present, as well as provide some resources for folks to explore some of those outcomes that Heather was talking about in terms of outcomes, in terms of indicators like economics or education, health, housing, justice, safety, voting, those pieces. So we have a collection of resources available for you to explore the impact of segregation on the current, just that lasting, the lasting impact. So those are all under Get Informed. Those are teaching resources that we hope our schools can take advantage of, as well as community groups and individuals looking to learn a little bit more about the history, the legacy and the history of racialized housing in Milwaukee County. Then I'm going to move to teach the curriculum. We have a page set up for schools that includes the curriculum that Heather was sharing before. These materials are again developed for use in classrooms. And we also recognize that the redress movement has some curricular resources too that we want to share with you, and Dynasty Caesar is going to talk about some of those in a minute. But all those pieces that Heather shared earlier are available right here. That curriculum is just, you can access it here where it says this inquiry. And the slideshow that she showed is just click here for an overview of the inquiry and samples of kids' work. So all those materials and links to resources are available within, within that document. Elizabeth Flam, Corey mentioned her earlier when she was talking about acknowledgement, also created a set of lessons that talks about some of the concepts from the Color of Law. And these are really designed for teachers and anyone who's in a position where they want to build their own background knowledge so that they can talk with others and have a more fully informed background. So if you're looking for a summary of the Color of Law, this is a good place to go. And I'm going to talk about next steps in a little bit. Along with developing materials for schools, we've also had the opportunity to talk at a housing conference and developed a 1-hour workshop that takes our timeline and some of the pieces from our curriculum and makes it available for adults for a 1-hour workshop. So we have posted a fully articulated lesson plan with links to the materials and how to go about doing the workshop. We have a slide deck of annotated slides and a print-friendly version of the segregation timeline that you saw online before. And we'll talk a little bit about if you would like to use some of these materials, what kind of support we can help you with. We do know that Habitat for Humanity is adapting some of these materials, so we're excited to post your version of these resources on our site as well. And then finally, we have a do something. So for Heather shared kind of the 3 ways that we talk about doing something in classrooms, and we have replicated that on this site. So once you have some information about an accurate history, Reggie, I'm paraphrasing you, that when we have the whole truth, we can have better conversations and create strategies that actually work. So we've presented 3 ways that 3 buckets of ideas, of ways that individuals or classrooms or community organizations can help as allies and actors toward building a better Milwaukee for everyone. And we've organized those by show and grow what you know. So teaching others, supporting organizations that are already working toward housing justice, and then redressing and rebuilding. So looking at how do we affect policy and practices to redress the harm and rebuild toward a better Milwaukee. So as you scroll down here, you'll see some examples of those resources here. And the last tab is just the history, as Corey explained, and our acknowledgements page. So we want to make sure that you know that we know that this has been a community effort to get to where we are right now. So just in the interest of time, I'm just going to move on to next steps, if that's all right with everyone. Okay. So in terms of where we are with this project, as you can see, we feel really proud of where we are, and we see this as being halfway through our project. So we have Milwaukeeized the color of law. We have created some curriculum. And our next step is really to think about how do we do a full-fledged pilot in Milwaukee County school districts so that we can test this curriculum out that has been tested in one setting into multiple settings. So at this point, we are looking for your help in identifying school districts that are interested in piloting the curriculum that we've developed. So the curriculum is out there for anyone to use. We're interested in working with some school districts that would like to collaborate on what it takes to fully support high school classrooms in delivering this curriculum. So specifically, we're looking for Milwaukee County school districts that have a community group that's interested in building the will to teach this curriculum. So we're looking for classrooms, districts, and community groups to participate in that. And we are seeking funding to help pay teachers as part of that project. Ideally, we're looking for 5 different school districts. And we're hoping that we have some that have shown some interest. So we're hoping to make some decisions on that by beginning of September. So we're looking at September 9th as a date that we're targeting. I shared like that site where we've got this 1-hour workshop. Heather and I have delivered that 1-hour workshop, and we're interested in partnering with organizations, community organizations, or other professional organizations that are interested in delivering that workshop and how we might support you in that process. So part of it would be, we're considering offering just an on-site workshop where we deliver it to an organization and then have some time with folks who are interested in delivering it to their organization to do kind of the behind the scenes part. So why did we just construct it this way, and what are some things that might happen as you deliver it? So if that is of interest to you, we would love to hear from you. And we've put our, if someone can just throw our email address in the chat too. So we're just dbdmke@gmail.com, and we would love to hear from you. All right. I'm just going to pause for a second before I throw it over to Dynasty to see if anyone has any questions or comments. I know we threw a lot at you. So I'm seeing some comments, and yeah, thank you. Sweet. I love hearing the specifics. So please, please do get in touch with us.
Yeah, Heidi, I just did my segregation presentation for the entire staff of Cudahy School District earlier today. I can connect you all with the superintendent there.
Thank you, Reggie. All right. So Richard Rothstein is really the color of law, and Reggie Jackson with the hidden impact of segregation in Milwaukee are really the grandfathers of why we're here today. And so we're excited to share the space and time with our friends over at the Redress Movement. And so I'm just going to pull up, and Reggie, I know we've got both Reggie and Dynasty here, just to talk a little bit about other ways that folks can get involved beyond a curriculum with affecting policy and practices through a coalition of folks. So I'm going to just pull up your website and turn it over to Dynasty just to talk about what Redress is doing.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Dynasty Caesar. I am the senior organizer for the Redress Movement. Our organization was established through working with Richard Rothstein and all of the questions that people had about what do we do now? We've read your book and now we don't know where to start. And so the redress movement really was developed to be that organization that starts redressing some of the issues that have come from housing segregation. I myself am a part of the team, and Reggie Jackson is also a part of the redress movement on the research team. And so right now our organization is building a roundtable. Our roundtable is open right now to new participants who are interested in being a part of creating change as it pertains to housing segregation. We're looking forward to building a multicultural movement. And so it's not exclusively set for any particular race. We have people from all over the city that are partnering and working together. But what is really powerful about this space is that it is a peer-to-peer relationship. Often what we see with community organizations across the city is that there will be an entity that may be a predominantly white organization working with a predominantly Black or Brown organization in a way that they are maybe a funder or someone who is from a board or something, someone that's an entity that isn't a peer. This space creates unity in a way that allows up as our true selves and have real deep conversations about housing without feeling like we're just providing information to receive something. We're working together to dismantle some of the barriers that are in place for us to move forward and desegregate Milwaukee's housing. Reggie, if you had anything else to add, I'll pass it over to you.
Oh, sure. So I joined the Redress Movement back in January of this year as part of the research team. And we've created quite a bit of information on the website. We have several things that I think you all may find very interesting. We created a very comprehensive vocabulary list related to segregation-related terms, as well as examples of each of those. We created a citizen's guide, which is something you all can use if you're interested in kind of, it's literally for people around the country who are interested in trying to figure out how segregation happened within their communities. So there are a lot of resources related to that in the Citizens Guide. Also, we have a comprehensive curriculum about segregation. So everything you've ever wanted to know about it is kind of broken down into different modules. So that's some other things we created. Most recently, last week, we launched our story maps for each of the 3 cities. So Redress started in Milwaukee, Denver, and Charlotte to begin with, and we expect to expand into other cities as we move forward. So just kind of the story of segregation in each of the 3 cities. I think this will be a great companion piece to what you all have created. I mean, I'm just amazed at how the work that you all did for this project has just grown over the course of time, and the curriculum is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, all of the materials that this collective group has put together is just really amazing to me. And I'm really excited to continue to collaborate with many of you that are on this call in this work. I think it's really important because Milwaukee will always be the poster child for segregation. And so I think if we can do things that are positive changes in Milwaukee related to segregation, I think we set the example for other communities around the country. So really looking forward to continue to work with all of you and appreciate, being on the team with Dynasty and all of the work she's doing, bringing, community members from throughout Metro Milwaukee together to meet and talk and strategize about these things. So we'll continue to work as Redress. Right now, we're working on a couple policy briefs related to the impact of corporate landlords in Milwaukee and the growth of that, as well as a policy brief about the impact of the most recent assessments that were released in April and how they were very disparate outcomes in terms of the highest increases by far were in the central city and the lowest were in, the whiter parts of town. So those are some of the things that we're working on right now. But I'm just really like happy to be in this space. I wish we were like in person so I could give a lot of you hugs because I haven't seen you in a while. But it's great that we have this virtual space, and appreciate, all the work. The website, it's just, this is something that I think as people begin to use your website, the resources that are available, this is going to be incredible learning experience for people. So thank you all for creating something that's really so powerful and just amazing. I mean, I can't even find the words to describe how amazing it is. It's phenomenal. So thank you all.
How do we follow that up? Thank you, Reggie. You were part of the context that helped inspire people to create this. So thanks to all of you. I know so many of you on this call were part of the building of the timeline, the building of the curriculum. Some of you I know, some of your names I recognize. So thanks for being on. Heidi, did you have any final thoughts or parting words for us? You're muted.
Try this again. I just wanted to restate the piece that really pulled us together as a group, that from Richard Rothstein, from The Color of Law, that only if we can develop a broadly shared understanding of our common history will it be practical to consider steps we could take to fulfill our obligations. And so we wanted to thank everyone for being here. Thank everyone again for their contribution to helping us create something where we can do a better job to help with making this a part of a curriculum by design and not by individual choice. So thank you everyone for being here. We are, gosh, look at us, 7 minutes early. We are happy to stick around for a few minutes if any folks want to ask any questions or would like to get connected on the pilot in a high school or with their organization. We're happy to have that conversation. So thank you.